So you approved the budget, you signed the contract, everything seems to be fine. And yet at the end of the project, you spent 40% more than anticipated.
And nobody lied. And that's the hard part to understand.
Yes, no one lied, but the numbers almost doubled.
That is the change order trap. And today we're going to explain
how to avoid it.
I'm Brandon Holland, Senior Sales Manager with ARIID Build and Remodel.
And I'm Ariana Adireh Anderson, CEO of ARIID Group.
So what is a change order?
Let's begin. And that's a question I want to ask you, Brandon. What is a change order?
Okay. I mean, it's a formal amendment to the contract where both parties agree upon the nature of the work that's going to be performed and the costs associated with that work.
But all of them are still legit. Please talk a little bit more.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. I mean,
Okay.
there are many legitimate reasons why you would see a change order on a project. So they're not always a problem. A lot of times change orders are legit. And essentially, they're not caused by anything that anyone did wrong, but some of them are not legitimate.
It could be also homeowner driven. Sometimes client does change their mind or wants to upgrade, and those would also be considered as a change order.
Yeah.
So it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's like, hey, I just want a better thing, or we thought about it and we want to pivot and slightly go in a different direction.
Yeah, and sometimes you open up a wall, you find some mold, your subfloors in your bathroom need replaced, and you didn't anticipate that. So those are all reasons why you might see a change order.
So we talked about two.
Right.
So what about the third? What would be a third change order?
Well, this is the nasty one, the underbid, and it happens quite often.
Yeah.
So typically what will happen is, you reach out to 3 or 4 contractors and they ask, what are you looking to do? They get a full scope of work, but they don't really dig into the specifics. And so when they give you your bid, it's based off of very limited information. And so they're making a lot of assumptions, and in turn, they end up giving you the lowest number they can come up with based off of those assumptions.
So what can the homeowner do differently to avoid that third trap, I would say?
Yeah. So make your contractor get specific, actually sit down with them and, discuss exactly what your vision is, what, type of finished materials you're going to use. Don't just leave it to them to figure it out for you, because at the end of the day, you want your project done the way you want it done.
Mm-hmm.
You want the materials that you want. And so letting a contractor decide that on the bid is reckless. What'll happen is they're going to put together a number based off of, the lowest possible cost on materials.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you don't have the lowest cost of taste, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then people it costs so much to install something that making sure we have the right numbers for the materials themselves.
Yeah. So, homeowners, if you're trying to tell the difference, a lot of times you can't. And so the key is to, not wait till you're in the moment and protect yourself before you sign, before the walls are actually demoed.
100%. I like that.
So can I put the design side on the table? Because I want to talk about the allowance trap.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
We love those ones. The allowance trap, right? We have. Yeah. I love our names here.
What part of the design process might contribute to a change order?
Well, that could be an allowance, or even we would call it allowance trap. And here's where it contributes. Probably one of the biggest things is when client goes into beginning of a project and they have a budget in mind. And so they would break down and say, okay, well, we want to invest in our tiles. We are budgeting for that, let's say, $250 a square foot. But then they end up going through a design and they end up selecting a $450 a split tile alone that doesn't even include the installation. And so now we just doubled on the cost of the product. So having budget allowance that are not really realistic to what the material will be, will actually, someone could fall into the trap not knowing how much material actually costs.
Okay, so what you're saying is that basically every dollar over the allowance amount is going to be seen in way of a change order.
It could be, especially if it goes beyond design development.
Okay.
And we are all the way in construction. And when you said earlier, when materials aren't budgeted, and we'll touch bases on that a little bit later and break it down. But yes, that becomes a problem. Because and you look at something, you're like, oh, this is so pretty.
Right.
But then how much does it really cost?
Mm-hmm.
So helping that area be developed during design phase.
Yeah, and I don't think people understand the difference in price point when you're looking at materials, because when you're just looking at images online, you don't have a price tag associated with each image, and they can vary wildly. I mean, especially, tile is my favorite example. I used to be a tile setter, and you can go for $2 a square foot on some cheap tile, and then there's other tiles where you're talking a couple $100 a square foot,
right?
Easily.
And the quality will actually, there is a reason why one costs so little and the other one, hey, it's just like, bargain, but it's the quality, it will crack, there's issues with it, or you get a beautiful, nice made Italian tile that's going to look phenomenal in 50 years. So it's heavy, it's porcelain, you pay what you get for when it comes to material. So yeah,
absolutely. And I think a lot of people make the false assumption that when you see a tile that's cracked, you automatically blame the installer.
Oh yeah.
And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just the wrong material for the application, and it's just made too cheaply to to handle the abuse.
And then you can't really do anything about it. So yes, so we have an allowance. That what can a homeowner do? And that's a question we would get, is like, what can I do to protect myself from that? And that would be like making sure that you talk to the contractor and walk through every single line with them. Does that include, and what does that include as the budget for the tile? So have they accounted for the one you want?
Right. Yeah. Make them get specific, right?
So we have to get things right in the beginning, and that avoids those traps.
That's great advice.
So another thing that we have is incomplete drawings. We see that, and that really touches bases on what you said earlier, is when someone comes in and gives you a low bid, but they just don't have enough drawings. So honestly, that's the easiest place to avoid that, is when you actually take the time to have the design team do the complete set. You have all your construction documents. You have decided on which tile you're getting. Is it the $2 or $200 tile? Then you have an actual substantial information that a contractor can bid on.
They also need to, basically understand how to interpret it. When they're looking at the drawings, how do they interpret what you actually meant? And if they're incomplete, they're making a lot of assumptions.
100%.
And there's a lot of room for error in that. And then, you're basically relying on your contractor to fill in the blanks on the design work. And, quite frankly, you've already paid for design. So, make sure that you're getting what you paid for.
Yes, that is executed. That's so true. And in our model, design builds that we actually avoid a lot of those, not even mistakes, but a lot of those pitfalls, because we are meeting with you, with our project manager, and really talking about the project when we're still in design development, where we're finishing construction documents. We're checking in on what is the budget. So we're actually budgeting for that material before you even, before the client signs up with us for a construction portion of the project.
So I guess what happens when the plans are interpreted wrong, or if they're incomplete? I mean, what happens?
Yeah, I mean, if they are handing off to a contractor, so then it's like that becomes a problem.
Who pays for that, though?
That becomes a blame game. I mean, that's what we see, is like, and you ask who pays for it. Well, a lot of times the client pays for it, because it does become like a ping pong. The designer is incomplete, the contractor, and the designer will contractor wouldn't and go ahead and bought this material and it's wrong. And so
because the project becomes fragmented at that point.
It does.
And so what happens is, you got basically a designer from one firm and a contractor from another, and they're not communicating. And essentially, the designer says the drawings were clear. The contractor says that, the field was required to make a judgment call. And so that's why they deviated. And at the end of the day, the homeowner is just stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
And they have no power over the situation.
Right.
And, they end up paying for it. And it's unfortunate.
And it also causes delays. That's another big thing, which is also expensive.
Yeah.
It pushes the project further, especially if, homeowner moved out, for example. Now, instead of leaving outside your home for 6 months or a year, now you're there for 2 years, 3 years, and you don't have a house. So that's how like the nightmare versions of things that happen.
Yeah, and those costs add up a lot during construction. So how do you protect yourself? Let's give the people something they can use.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like, let's give them a hope, a light at
I
the
feel like
end
we
of the
just
tunnel. It's like,
beat them down, and now we're like, I don't know.
all of this is scary.
There's light at the end of the tunnel. So
there is. So it's one of those things, is like making sure that if you have a change or modification, it's not verbal. It's not something you agreed with a contractor and you just like shook hands. It's written. They don't do anything until you actually approve the change order. So there needs to be a layer of accountability and check between what is happening and what you're told.
Yeah, and one thing that I appreciate about the way that we handle things in the field on the construction side is, if there's a change order, we stop work until we are all in agreement on
100%.
the nature of what's going to happen, what the cost is, and once we're in agreement, then we continue. Now, it doesn't mean we stop work completely. It just means we stop work on that portion of the project that we don't know exactly what we're going to proceed with.
Yeah, and we adopted a good system where it's like you sign the change order, you pay for it, and then everything gets done. So like it helps to move the project in a lot of ways, especially towards the end where the budget could be changed, and there's maybe there's a change in the amount. Making sure that we are in alignment in completing the project successfully.
Yeah. So what happens if we find something behind the walls? I mean, this does happen quite often, and I'd love you to walk us through how that conversation goes, and then when do you communicate that? How soon in your discovery process do you actually communicate that to the client? And then what does the approval process look like, getting that change order signed and paid for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have some allocations set aside for smaller things that we can still push the project, and that's our process within a ARIID group. So then we don't slow down the project, because it does cost money, and people sometimes don't understand. Like, hey, we hold off a day, but then now we're pushing the second trade who was supposed to come in, and now they're booked for another project. Now we're waiting for a month.
So it's a domino effect.
And then it's like, well, it's been 2 months and we haven't had anyone. It's like, yes, because they were scheduled on a certain day. So that also creates issues. So we do have allowance, not even allowance, but we have a segment of money set aside that we can continue. But if it's a larger portion, it is brought immediately. It is discussed within the design team. We have the best solutions available, and then we present those to the clients. We have budgets, we have solutions, so we can actually resolve it as soon as possible. So they get addressed, I want to say in a working days, within 24 hours, we have answers to the clients.
Yeah. And I think that one rule saves, clients thousands of dollars on a project.
100%. Yeah, it does. It does, like making sure that things move along and they understand what is coming up.
So the project that runs within budget consistently, those projects seem to have one thing in common. What is that?
The biggest thing is the design is fully developed and complete before construction is started, before any demo starts, before you allow anyone to touch anything. That is complete, signed off. Then that will prevent change orders, surprises, things that you didn't account for. That will help to prevent those.
Yeah. And I will say on the construction side, we try to avoid letting a customer or client sign a contract before we actually know what the design looks like after it's completed.
Yeah.
They've made material selections because, when you're operating in that mode, you have a fixed bid situation where there are very few surprises along the way.
Yeah.
We don't use allowances, and that makes a huge difference in controlling the cost of the project.
Yeah.
With that, it ends up being a situation where the client has to wait longer to sign their construction agreement.
Mm-hmm.
But when they sign it, they know what they're paying for. They know what they're signing up for. And there aren't a lot of surprises.
Yeah. Everything that we could control, we do control. And then, of course, things that we don't know about, those are things that we do bring it up to the clients because we don't know what's going to be, especially on our remodels, we don't know what's going to be behind the wall.
Yep. And so you're not factoring in best case. You're actually factoring in the true nature of the project.
We do, but we do set aside some contingencies for those things too. So a lot of times our budget will be higher. But what it does have, what other contractors will not have, is accounting for some of those unforeseen circumstances and also the coordination within the team about the project. And almost none of the contractors will put in a segment for communication with the design team as a fee. So on paper, it might look more, but at the end of the day, it's going to cost you less. Yeah, for sure.
Change orders are always going to be more expensive than actually taking the time in design. The most important part of design from my perspective as the contractor side of the business and also as the client in some cases, the most important part is you spend the money on the design on the front end to prepare yourself so that you know exactly what the next steps are, you know what the costs are going to be. And that's when you truly have control over your project. And so when those small things come up, when you find the mold in the walls, when you find the rotting subfloor in the bathrooms, it isn't the 13th thing that you've had to sign a change order for.
100%.
And that makes a huge difference.
Thing that was part of the building that you actually discovered. And actually, it's a good thing you discovered because now you can fix it.
Absolutely.
So your house isn't falling apart, or you're breathing all the mildew and all other things that you had inside the walls and you didn't even know.
Yeah, and those things spread.
They do.
They really do.
So, well, I do want to thank you for staying with us for this episode before you build. And would love for you to join again. Now, if you found this helpful, or if you would love to hear from you, what were some change orders that you encountered that you weren't expecting? Would love to hear in the comments below. And again, like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode.
Yeah, thanks again. We'll see you next week.